significant for two reasons. One, he was the only guy in the block when we were in a race would walk with his hands next to his hips, and nobody else ran like Murray Matlin. And he also happened to be the fastest guy on Vernon Avenue. And he also was one of the top 2 or 3 punchball players. So he was in our game, and I was playing first base, which was right next to one curb. And third base was on the other side, and second base was all the way down by a sewer, and then there was home. So Murray Matlin gets up, which was already scary, right? Because he's such a great punchball player. Murray gets up, and he punches one. It was like a laser, and I know it was coming to my right, and I had my oxblood-colored first baseman's mitt on my left. But just for the hell of it, I knew I wasn't going to make the catch. But just for the hell of it, I go like this with my mitt, and a miracle happened. It caught the ball. Actually got Murray Red Matlin out with that oxblood-colored first baseman's mitt. And if anything helped me forget about the Joe Medwick autograph glove, it was that mitt. And I always treasured for the rest of the time that I ever played punchball. And punchball, of course, required a special kind of ball in those days, which was called a Spalding, which was made by the A.G. Spalding Company, but we called it a Spalding in Brooklyn. And it was very hard to get official Spaldings during the war because they were made of rubber. And rubber was needed for the war effort. And we had to find other kinds of balls. I was very lucky because my Uncle Ed was an avid tennis player, and he would give me his used tennis balls every so often. But one day, my best friend Howie and I were we were not in our favorite Alan Shirley's candy store. For some reason, we were in Goldstein's candy store. Now, Goldstein's candy store was run by an old guy. I should talk, right? I'm 90 years old. But Mr. Goldstein was an older guy to us. And it was a strange kind of candy store because unlike Alan Shirley's, he actually had games. Not many, but he had games. And he kept them on the shelf, very dusty, of course, because very few bought any games from Goldstein. And all of a sudden, Howie and I had come back. I think we came back from the movies, and for some reason, we went into Goldstein's store, and we couldn't believe what we were seeing. We were seeing on one of the shelves were 2 Spaldings. It was almost like a fantasy. And Howie says to Mr. Goldstein, "Can we see one of those Spaldings up there?" And he gives it to Howie. Shows it to me. I said, "Well, we got to see if this is for real, and why it wouldn't be." So we bounced it a couple of times. We bounced it, and it bounced perfectly. And we said to Mr. Goldstein, "This is exactly what happened, Mr. Goldstein. Is this Spalding for real?" And he looked at us as if we were stupid, and his answer was, "Real? It's the real McCoy." I'll never forget that. It was the real McCoy, and of course, I don't know, I guess it was 10 cents in those days, but we actually got this great sport. It was a wonderful thing. I want to tell you about VJ Day, because VJ Day was a very special day in my life. My best friend Howie, his parents, Sally and Sidney Sparrow, got wealthy by our standards pretty quickly. They have started a pickle and mayonnaise business, and it developed into Spare Way, SPARE -way, food products. And they had a factory about 5 blocks away from my house. The factory was on DeKalb Avenue, corner of Marcy, right across the street from the S&L Deli, where Max the waiter told me, there's a war on. So they were making pretty good bucks during the war, pretty good bucks, and enough for them to rent a summer home in Seagate. Now, Seagate was a very special part of Brooklyn. It was the very tip of Coney Island, and it was a gated community. So if you wanted to go visit somebody in Seagate, you had to stop at the gate, tell them who you were and who you were visiting before you can get in. So the Sparrows had this nice summer home at Seagate, and I used to go there and visit Howie very often, very often. In fact, I had a lot of good stories in the book about Seagate. Anyhow, so now it's August 1945. We already knew that the atomic bomb hit Hiroshima. We knew about the hydrogen, or whatever the second bomb was called, that hit Nagasaki. And everybody sensed that the war was going to be over, we thought or hoped, pretty soon. We weren't sure. So now it's the morning, and Howie and I would at the beach, gone for a swim. We came out from a swim. All of a sudden, Sally Sparrow, Howie's mom, is yelling, "Come here, come here, come here." And we go running up the house, and she tells us that the war is over. War is over. And that instantly meant there had to be some kind of celebration, and the Sparrows had a very big family. So the word went out, everybody has to come to the house in the afternoon. Is it going to be a big celebration? Which there was. And a very interesting thing, aspect of the celebration was that if there were any soldier around at a time like that, you had to bring him in as part of the celebration. So Howie's big sister Norma was very, very attractive girl. I think she was about maybe 19 or so, and very, as I said, very attractive. And of course, she was there for the great party. And it turned out that the soldier that they found nearby happened to be Morris Gold. Morris Gold wound up marrying Norma Sparrow, and it was a great marriage, as it turned out, because it went from the mayonnaise and pickle family to Gold's horseradish. This was the Gold of Gold's horseradish. Wonderful. Wonderful coincidence. Meantime, so the party is going on, and of course, Howie and I, we partook of everything, and then suddenly, Howie's mom says to me and Howie, "Listen, guys, I want to take you to Coney, join the celebration." And Sally Sparrow then drove what was a very, very attractive car, even though it was 1937. It was called a Packard. Packard was a very classy car then, and it was in the same level of a Caddy. So Sally drives us to Coney, parks underneath the Coney, the elevated, and she took us to a Chinese restaurant. Now, up until that time, the only Chinese meal which I would have probably once or twice a month was egg drop soup, chicken chow mein, and an almond cookie. And the tea was always free. Now, I never had anything that deviated from egg drop soup, chicken chow mein, and an almond cookie. And now we were in this Chinese restaurant that was a little bit higher class than the one on Tompkins Avenue. And the waiter comes and gives us the menu, and I'm looking at these exotic things that I had never heard of before. And the one thing that caught my eye, if you don't mind it not being kosher, was shrimp in lobster sauce. And I said, Jesus, shrimp and lobster, how can I not have chicken chow mein? But I'm not in Yiping Hing on Tompkins Avenue. I'm in this semi-fancy joint underneath the L. So I ordered shrimp and lobster sauce, and it was like one of the greatest discoveries of my young life. We finished this great meal. And now Sally takes us to all the great things in Coney. One of the great things in Coney was the Bowery, where they had all these different kind of things, including skee ball. Now, skee ball was I think it was no more than a nickel. It might even have been penny. No, I think it was a nickel. Anyway, you put a nickel in, you pull the lever, and out comes 5 wooden balls, and you rolled them, and you had to get them into one of 3 holes. And if you did well, you'd get a coupon. If you got it in the middle hole, which was 100 thing, you were real good. Anyhow, we played our skee ball, and then she took us to, of course, we had to go to Nathan's, we had a hot dog, and then was the big thrill of all. The big thrill of all, we'd never been on a roller coaster before. Coney had a lot of roller coasters. The greatest of all was the Cyclone, which was too scary for us at that time. But across the street from the Cyclone was actually the first roller coaster that Coney had, and it was so old, it was called the F&M Thompson Scenic Railway. They didn't even call it a roller coaster, but it was a roller coaster. And now it was at night, and we decided that we were going to try. We had no idea what it was like. And the thing about the F&M Thompson roller coaster is that it went underneath the elevated tracks, then it came out, and this was dark, it was nighttime, went up, and then of course came the first hole. Now, of course, we had not been on a roller coaster ever in our lives, and I have to tell you, this was one of the greatest scary things, greatest because we survived it, most exciting ride up until that time in my life. And it was so great. We did it a second time because we didn't think it was that real. It was so great. And that was it. That was how we celebrated VJ Day at Coney Island. Now, I must tell you, I have a lot of great Coney Island stories in the book, but the one that was another downer. It was what did I say? It was a good news and bad news. So when I was visiting Howie at Seagate, every once in a while, we go to Coney, and we go to the Penny Arcade. And the Penny Arcade was great because for a penny, you could get all kinds of great games, including old-time pinball machines. It was wonderful, wonderful. Penny Arcades were just a great, great thing for a kid. But anyhow, now we're on the boardwalk, and we're walking past the steeplechase, which was another terrific place to visit, to rides. And we see something that we had never noticed before right off the boardwalk, and it was called steeplechase poker. Actually, this was in the morning. It's about 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, and we said, what the hell is this? Let's go in and try it out. And we go in, and this was another one of these nickel deals. And the deal was, for a nickel, you got 3 balls, and you had to throw them underneath the glass, and there were different, it was like the ace of spades, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. And if you got 2 of a kind, you got a coupon. Now, it was one of these days when Lady Luck was looking on us, because we were just getting things like unbelievable. And the difference was that if you got a coupon at steeplechase poker, it wasn't like the chintzy stuff at the skee ball, where if you were lucky with skee ball and you got maybe some cheap pen or something like that, you could get good stuff with the coupons. And we got done. This is what I got, because I thought this was a wonderful thing to bring home for Mother. First of all, there was a salt and pepper shakers. That was number 1. Number 2 was a large pitcher for like orange juice or whatever. And the great thing, the coup de grace, the absolutely great thing, was a sugar dispenser that had a cone shape on the top, it was a red cover. And if you turned it like this, and then not like this, it measured 1 spoonful of sugar. So if you wanted 2 spoonfuls, you did it once, and then you did it twice. I thought this was a fantastic invention. So what I'm bringing home to Mom is salt and pepper shaker, great pitcher, and this wonderful sugar dispenser. And I figured this is going to be a great thing. It'll justify my going to Howie's and going to Steeplechase Poker. Now, to get home from there, from Coney, I had to take the Brighton Express. And I always like to be in the front car because you could open the window and stick your head out. But when I got on at Stillwell Avenue, which was the last stop, it meant there was going to be crowd coming in on West 8th Street. There'd be another one at Ocean Parkway. And then the third one would be Brighton Beach. And it was going to be very crowded. And my 3 gifts were in a brown paper bag. And I'm holding it because now the subway is getting crowded. I'm protecting it like a fullback in the NFL. And I managed to get him home. Nothing got broke. And I walk into the living room and I said, Mom, look what I got for you from Coney Island. Of course, she doesn't know what's happening. I pull out the salt and pepper shaker. And she looks at it. And she says, what's that? And of course, she's pointing to the salt and pepper shaker on the dining room table. She was not impressed. I was subdued, to say the least. So I pull out the big orange juice, or the whatever you call the pitcher, put it on the table. I'm waiting for the enthusiasm, which is not coming. And we used to have an orange squeezer, right? You had a half an orange and you did it on the squeezer, and and if you're lucky, you got about a half a glass out of it. So she was not impressed with this gigantic orange juice thing. So now I'm waiting for the big deal. The big deal. I pull out the sugar thing, and I'm actually showing my mother. I opened the top and I showed her the mechanism that counts, 1 spoonful, 2 spoonfuls. What do you think, Mom? She didn't say a word. She then went to the kitchen table, picked up a spoon, says, this is all I need. And if I ever was heartbroken in front of my mother for not satisfying her heart's desires, that was it. So I don't think I ever went back to Steeplechase Poker again. I don't know what's the deal on questions, or when do you want to do the questions, or do you have questions? What's the story?
We want to hear your stories. No one here wants to hear what my stories are.
As I mentioned, I had a best friend. And in those days, best friends were very, very important and revered, really revered. And my best friend was Howie Sparrow. I told you all about Spareway Food Products and so on and so forth. Well, this was also around 1943. And one of the things that both of us liked to do was ride a bike. Now, in 1943-44, the war was on and no bicycles were made. And we didn't have a bike. Neither of us had a bike. But 2 blocks from Ebbets Field, where the Dodgers played, and not far from where Howie had moved, by the way. That was a big deal, because the parents were making a lot of dough. So they moved from Verdon Avenue to 602 Montgomery Street on, it was in Crown Heights. It was about 7 blocks from Ebbets Field. And I used to visit Howie there when we weren't going to Seagate. So one day we decided we wanted to go bike riding. And the title of this, which is in Tales of Brooklyn, right? That's me on the cover, by the way. Age 4, ice skating on double runners on Vernon Avenue. Howie and I decided that we'd go bike riding, and what we did was we went to Rogers Avenue right near the ballpark, and there was a bike store, and you could rent a bike, and it was very cheap. You know, it was like whatever it was $1 or less, and you didn't have to leave your wallet or your glasses or anything for a deposit. They trusted you in those days, and we got on the bikes. But we didn't, by the way, the title of this chapter was How We Discovered Staten Island. Okay, that was the title. That's the title in the book. So now Howie and I are on the bikes, a beautiful, beautiful sunny summer day. We didn't know what the heck we were going to do. We just started riding. So we ride over to Ocean Parkway, which was one of the great boulevards and still is one of the great boulevards of Brooklyn. Now we go a little bit down Ocean Parkway, and all of a sudden Howie says, "Hey, look what's here." And it wasn't as big as Ocean Parkway, but it was a parkway, and it was Fort Hamilton Parkway. And neither of us knew anything from Fort Hamilton Parkway, but Howie says, why don't we give it a shot? Okay, so we take a right turn, and we're going down Fort Hamilton Parkway, and we're looking around like this is part of Brooklyn we never seen before, because you don't go too far out of Williamsburg when I was a kid. So we're riding along, and all of a sudden we come to the end of Fort Hamilton Parkway. It's unbelievable. And what's at the end of Fort Hamilton Parkway? Water. This was New York Bay. And we're looking around, and all of a sudden we see two signs. One sign on the left says to 69th Street Ferry, and there's the other sign said to 39th Street Ferry. Well, 69 looked better than 39 for whatever reasons, and we start pedaling over. We get to the 69th Street Ferry, and believe me, the most amazing thing about it was that there was a ferry there, and they were called electric ferries. I have a picture in the book, actually, of the electric ferry. And it was mostly, this is before there was a Verrazano Staten Island bridge from Brooklyn to Staten Island. The only way you get there was from the ferry down at the Battery, Staten Island ferry, but there were two Staten Island ferries from Brooklyn. And we said, why don't we see where this thing goes? So we took the bikes on the ferry. I don't even think we had to pay anything. I'm sure we didn't have to pay. No, we didn't have to pay. Get to Staten Island, and this is like a new world for us. This is what do we do now? And we see a sign that says Victory Boulevard. I said, let's go up. Let's take this and see where it goes. So we get on Victory Boulevard, and it was a very, very steep climb. And mind you, these were only 1-speed bikes, balloon tired bikes, nothing, no 4, 5, 6, or 21 speed like today. But we were kids, we had all kinds of energy, and we're climbing up Victory Boulevard. And all of a sudden, Victory Boulevard levels off, and we're riding maybe a quarter of a mile on Victory Boulevard leveled off. And we see on the right, this sign that says Silver Lake Park. And we take a look at Silver Lake Park, and we didn't see any lake. So we said, the hell with this. And we get back on the bike, and we're riding a little more. And all of a sudden we come to another park, and it says Clove Lakes Park. And it was a lake right there. So we said,
I don't think anybody else.
we gotta try this place. And we parked the bikes, rented the rowboats, and now we're having a great time rowing in Clove Lakes Park. And then
And stay with me, and you'll run out.
What?
The first couple of times to stay,
Okay,
and you'll run out.
yeah,
Does
right,
that work?
right.
is there a
right,
problem?
right.
Is there a problem?
Somebody's not muting themselves and they should.
Am I okay?
You're okay. We can hear you fine, Stan.
Okay, so now we have a great time rowing in Clover. And we're going down the hill. It's just the greatest. Now, for a kid at that time, we were about 11 or 12 years old, to be on a balloon-tired bike to go down what was like an endless hill was one of the most exciting things in my life up until then. It was just incredible. And of course, there were hardly any cars around, so that made it even better. We get to the ferry, get on the electric ferry, have a wonderful ride back to Brooklyn. And we then we decided to go to Alan Shirley's candy store, and we get there. The guy said, so where were you guys today? And we said, or I said, we discovered Staten Island. And Staten Island to us was like the new world. It was like the new world, and nobody in Alan Shirley's candy store could figure out what the hell that was all about. So we had to tell them about Victory Boulevard. We had to tell them about Clover Lakes Park and the rowboats and the whole spiel and the electric ferries. And that to us was a very important thing in our lives. Another very important thing in my life was music, for a lot of reasons. First of all, my parents, Molly and Ben Fischler, love music, and they love to dance. And watching them dance what was called the one-step, which was fast, usually to a jazz tune, was very exciting for me to see, because they did it well, and you could see that they were loving it. And my mom and dad, every day there was some sort of music in the house. In the morning at breakfast, they had WOR on, and the John Gambling Show, they had a live four-piece orchestra, a four-piece band playing stuff. It was always music. And one of the musical instruments that we had was a very, very old Victrola. Now, to make the Victrola work, it had a crank, and you had to first crank it up. You had to put the 78 RPM record, the disc, which had two sides to it, by the way, on the turnabout, and then you had to. Everything was 78 RPM, so there's nothing to worry about with any 45 or 33 or any of that stuff. And the first record that I remember getting was Playmates with Kay Kaiser's band. Oh, Playmate, come out and play with me, and bring your dollies three, crying up by apple tree. I loved it, loved that. Played it over and over. Then the next one that I bought, which you could get a record then for 10 cents. 10 cents. I got Bob Crosby's Bobcats doing the Little Red Fox. Yeah, said the little fox. Yeah, you can't catch me. Yeah, said the little fox, singing merrily. Pardon my monotone, but everybody in the family had a monotone. So when we had a birthday, we only sang the first verse of Happy Birthday because nobody could stand the rest of it because we all had monotones. So I'm collecting records, and one after another. I love music. So one day, Howie and I went downtown Brooklyn. This was, again, right during the war. It was 1944. And we used to visit the department stores. This was usually before the holidays, which meant the most important part of the department store to us was the toy department. Usually it was on the 6th floor. There were three big department stores. There was Frederick Logis, there was NAMS, This is all on Fulton Street, which was basically our Broadway. So it was Frederick Loge's, across the street from the RKO Albee, which was a great movie house. Loge's, NAMS, and then the biggest one of all was A&S, Abraham and Strauss. And Abraham and Strauss had just built a mini skyscraper department store. So that was the big deal. So now we're in A&S, and for some reason, they had on the same floor as the toy department, they had what was a regular piano, and this guy was a sheet music seller. So he would be playing tunes, and if you liked the tune, he would sell you the sheet music. Sheet music was the big thing then. If you didn't buy the record, you had a piano and somebody could play the piano, so you'd buy the sheet music. And things like the words to songs were in actually you get a monthly magazine. It would have all the words to all the pop tunes on a hit parade for that particular month. So anyhow, we're in this portion of A&S, and there was this grand piano, and there was this guy, and he starts playing a tune. And this is the first time I ever had this experience where I actually heard a song being played that I had not heard before, and it was like instant love of the song. And of course, I didn't know what it was at the time, but then the guy pulls out the sheet music and people were buying it. I couldn't buy it because we didn't have a piano at the time. And the tune happened to be Sentimental Journey, which was a very significant World War II song, a very big song. And the vocalist was Doris Day, who went on to stardom in Hollywood. At that time, she was with Les Brown and his band of renown. And when I got home, I told my mom that I heard this song. She said, I never heard of it either. I said, well, I think it's going to be a real biggie. She said, well, if it's a real biggie, then you can get it at, we had a record store 2 blocks away on Willoughby and Tompkins, and that's where I got my Sentimental Journey. But I have to tell you, the most popular song that I ever played on my old Victrola, and by the way, the Victrola required needles, and you'd have to buy a pack of needles. You know, it would be about maybe 40 needles or 30 needles, and after a while, you had to loosen the needle holder, take out the old one, and put a new needle in, screw it tight. And then when after you wound it up and you put the lever on and the thing started to turn, then you took the actual needle part and put it onto the record. Now that meant if you played a record for a long enough time, the black vinyl would actually change color. And the color that it would wind up being is silver. And if the record had silver, that meant it was played a hell of a long time, many times. And I had one record of my whole collection that actually turned silver. And I'm sure nobody could ever guess it because it was an unusual tune. It was Jack Benny's band leader. It was Phil Harris doing That's What I Like About the South. Won't you come with me to Alabama? There, go see my dear old mammy. She's frying eggs and broiling hammy, and that's what I like about the South. There comes Bob with all the news. He's got the back coat and the button shoes, and he's all dressed up in his union dues, and that's what I like about the South. Don't take one, take two. They're dark brown and chocolate too. Suits me and must suit you, and that's what I like about the South. I know that tune backwards. That was my favorite tune. I was a Phil Harris fan after that, and he only did a couple of tunes. He did, The Other Side was a nothing tune. He did one called the Darktown Polka Club, which was a sensational tune, but nothing matched. And that's what I like about the South. And you can look up Phil Harris. That's what I like about the South on your computer. And you will find a video of Phil Harris doing it in a movie. And I played it for all my grandchildren. And the great thing about Phil,
Stan,
yeah,
Stan,
what?
okay, we want to interrupt now to have questions and answers if we can. Okay?
Okay,
Hello? All right.
I'm ready.
Not exactly a question. I just, it's a very brief story, but it's it's a Stan Fischler story, so I think I can get away with telling it. When I was a kid in school, the only thing my teachers really liked about me is that at the end of the year, when I handed in my books, they were in the exact same condition as when they were given to me. I don't think I cracked a book as a kid in school, but I read Stan Fischler books on hockey, and my parents were just thrilled I was reading anything. So thanks, Stan. I really appreciate those books.
Well, that's why they invented the Yiddish word nachas. I get a lot of nachas from different people over the years, and hearing that I guess the best word for my reaction is that's swell. I appreciate that. And I think looking back, my legacy will be books as much as anything. And I'm so happy that I was able to do this book, because the back picture will be interesting. That's me on the top of Ebbets Field, which is a story I will tell later if we have time. But that's a very unique picture. I am on the top of the night lights at Ebbets Field, right above center field. A good story is here, but I'll let you guys ask more questions. Go ahead.
Did you have any interaction at all with Adam Fox, who was the first Jewish Ranger?
He's not the first at all. There've been before Adam Fox, there was Hy Buller, who was in 51 as a rookie, was second All-Star. Before him, there was Max Labovich. Before Max, there was Alex Levinsky, who had one of the great nicknames of Jewish hockey. Alex Levinsky's nickname was Mine Boy, because his mother would go to all the games and she'd say to her neighbor, "That's mine boy, Alex, out there for the Rangers."
Do you have any stories with my rink rat buddy Stan here, Mr. Stanley Cup?
Well, you want to hear a Stanley Cup story?
Please.
Well, first of one of the great stories was how when the Montreal Canadiens won the Stanley Cup, they brought it to a studio on St. Catherine Street in Montreal called Rice's, and the team did individual and a group picture with the Stanley Cup, and they were in such a great mood that they all walked out, and they left the Stanley Cup in Rice's studio, and a cleaning lady came that night, and she looked at this thing. She didn't know what the heck the Stanley Cup was, but she figured this would be a nice place to put the geraniums. So she filled it up with water, put the flowers in it, and about 2 or 3 days later, somebody in charge of the Stanley Cup says, "Where's our Stanley Cup?" And they couldn't figure out where it was. And finally, they put 3 and 4 together, and they went back to Rice's, and it was still, the geraniums still were pretty fresh in Stanley's Cup.
Well, when they let me touch it, that we were a lot nicer to it.
Well, there's a lot of, when the Islanders won the cup in 1980, it was passed around, and Clark Gillies, may he rest in peace, he had it in his house, and he filled it up with the dog biscuits. And the pet canine had a couple of nice meals. And somebody asked him, said, "Why would you do that?" And he said, Clark says, "Well, he's a nice dog. Why not?" When the Pittsburgh Penguins won their first cup, I thought this was in excess. Mario Lemieux had a party at his swimming pool, and a couple of the guys were jumping in the water with the cup. But that's the way it was. Now they're becoming more strict. When the Lightning won the cup 2 years ago, one of the players got drunk and he slipped and fell with the cup and put a dent in it. So now it's under strict non-kosher supervision.
As to that, the
What?
man standing next to me here is the Stanley Cup's official guardian.
Very good. Any others?
Hey, Stan, how'd you get your start with the Rangers?
Well, I could say Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because that was my entree. In 1939, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was the biggest hit for a kid, like Star Wars and the other cockamamie crazy kids movies now. Every kid in 1939 to be certified as a kid had to see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So one Sunday or Sunday morning, my dad says to me, "I'm going to take you to see Snow White." I was so excited. I said, "Where, Dad?" He said, "The Globe Theater. It's in Times Square. It's about 45th Street. So we jump in the subway. We get off at the closest spot, which was 50th and 8th. We get out. It's like a downpour. It was like sheets and sheets and sheets of rain. We didn't have an umbrella. And my father says, "The Globe Theater is about six blocks from here, Stanley." And he looks up, and right in front of us was Madison Square Garden. The old garden was on 8th Avenue between 50th and 49th, and we were right at the corner at 50th and 8th. And my father sees that it's hockey today, not Ranger hockey, but Rovers hockey. Rovers were the Ranger farm team. He says, "I'm going to take it to a hockey game." And I started to cry. What the hell did I know from hockey? I want to go see Snow White. He's taking me to a hockey game. I was bawling and bawling. And just like with the oxblood colored Joe Medwick glove for $6, he didn't give in to me. Yanked me into the garden, and I was so furious that I had to do something to get even with my father. So I realized he was rooting for the home team, the Rovers, and they're playing Washington. So I'm going to root for this other team against my father. And Washington Eagles had a guy named Normie Burns who was blonde. And I identified him with my favorite radio cowboy, the Lone Ranger. And Normie Burns scored a hat trick, 3 goals. My guys won. My father lost. I felt pretty good. Next day, I go to school, PS 54. We do a thing called show and tell. I don't know whether you know what it is.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Mrs. Gould called on me, and I show and told about a hockey goalie that I saw the day before. Fascinated me. She gave me an A. I got an A out of hockey. I said, "This hockey ain't too bad." Next Saturday, Dad took me to see Snow White. On the way home, I said, Dad, I'd like to see another hockey game tomorrow. And that's how I started, going to the garden with my father to see the Rovers. I actually got my start with the Rangers much later. In 1951 or 50, the Rangers started a fan club, the Rangers fan club. And I joined the fan club, and we were able to put out a monthly paper called the Rangers Review, me and 2 other guys, Freddie Meyer, who's still a buddy of mine. And being that we were in the fan club in those days, it was easy access to players. Nobody was a big shot. The best guy in the Rangers made $10,000 a season. That's the difference. And we were able to interview guys for our newsletter, Ranger Fan Club newsletter. And I remember me and Freddie Meyer interviewed Eddie Coleman of the Rangers in his hotel room across the street from the garden. And I began to have access. And I went to Tommy Lockhart in in my last year of college. I was at Brooklyn College at 53. And I went, Tommy Lockhart ran the Rovers in the Eastern League. And I went up to him and I said, I'd like to write a newsletter for your league, free. He says, go ahead. So every week I'm handing the newsletter. It was circulated throughout the Eastern League. And it meant I was up at the Garden and the guys were noticing me. And when I graduated from Brooklyn College in 1954, I got a call from Herb Gorin, who was the Rangers press agent, who already knew me because I was always around there. He said, how would you like to come and work for us in publicity? And it was as if I was entering heaven. Hockey Haven was hockey heaven to me, or hockey heaven was hockey haven. And I spent the year working for the Rangers. And that was the first time I was getting paid in any hockey business. And that's where my career took off. So when people ask me, who do you root for? You root for the Islanders, you root for the Devils? I always tell them, I'm even. I'm like the song from Finian's Rainbow, great musical from 1949. And the tune was, when I'm not near the girl I love the girl I'm near. So when I worked for the Devils, I rooted for the Devils. When I worked for the Rangers, I rooted for the Rangers. When I did Islander games, I rooted for the Islanders. So I always tell Ranger fans, I'm eternally grateful to the Rangers because I got my first gig there, $50 a week. Loved it. Would have worked for nothing. In the middle of the season, I used to go in 7 days a week because it was heaven to me. In the middle of the season, my boss, Herbie Gorin, comes over to me and he says, we're giving you a raise. I got $55, an extra $5 without even asking for it. And that's how it all began. Snow White started. I'd like
And
to
what's your favorite Bruins story or anecdote about the Boston Bruins?
Well, first of all, I hated the Bruins because in 49-50, the Rangers went to the Cup final and Lynn Patrick was the coach and he walked out on the team to become coach of the Bruins. And we hated him for that. And we hated the Bruins for luring him away. And as it happened, we didn't make the playoffs for years after Lynn Patrick did a Benedict Donald on us. And but there were things about the Bruins that were fascinating. And one was the Thanksgiving doubleheader. On the day before Thanksgiving, that night, it was a tradition that the Bruins played at Madison Square Garden. And then on Thanksgiving night, the Rangers played the Bruins at Boston Garden. And I decided that I was in the fan club then. I decided that I was going to go to the game at the Garden at MSG, and just a block away on 50th and 8th was a Greyhound bus terminal. I'm going to take a Greyhound bus to Boston. I'm going to check into the Manga Hotel, which was next to Boston Garden, I found out. I'm going to see the game and then come home. And in those days, there was no New England Turnpike. It was Route 1. It was an awful trip, awful trip. I got to Boston 6 a.m. Get out of the bus, and I was punchy. I was really punchy, and I was told that if you take the subway, it'll bring you to the Boston Garden, Causeway Street, and the Manga Hotel. So I go down into the subway, and all of a sudden I think I'm hallucinating. Instead of a subway car coming in, it was a trolley car. Who ever heard of a trolley car in the subways? But that's the way it was in rinky-dink Boston. So I went to the Manga Hotel, and I went to a game, and that was my my first experience at a live Bruin game at Boston Garden. It was the first of many. I later found out that the Manga Hotel was actually part of a stand-up comics gag in Boston. And the gag, well, the way it was built, the Manga was part of three structures. They built the Garden in 1928, and they built the Garden over a North Station, which was the Boston and Main terminal, and the hotel over the station. So it was an engineering feat, but the problem was every so often when the trains came in, it would vibrate. So anyhow, the gag was a couple comes, checks in the Manga, they go into room 204. The husband says he's going to take a walk down to the Charles River. The wife says she's going to take a nap. He goes out, and she's in bed, and she's about to fall asleep. And all of a sudden, a train comes into North Station. The room vibrates. She falls on the floor, gets back into bed. She's about to fall asleep again. Now the train comes in. She falls on the floor. So in 10 minutes, she's on the floor 5 times. He calls up the manager. He says, "What's the matter?" She says, "Every time a train comes in, I fall on the floor." He says, "That's impossible." She says, "You come up and I'll show you." So 5 minutes later, knock on the door. She opens the door. There's the manager. He says, "Please come in and get into bed with me." So the manager climbs into bed. All of a sudden, the husband walks in, sees the guy in bed with his wife. He says, "What the hell are you doing there in bed?" And the manager looks up at the guy and says, "You won't believe this, but I'm waiting for a train to come in." Anyhow, I got to know guys on the Bruins over the years. Some of them were nice guys. And of course, Derek Sanderson became my pal, and I ghost wrote his book, "I've Got to Be Me." And I did a Bobby Orr and the Big Bad Bruins, which was the best-selling hockey book I ever did. So those are 2 good Boston stories in one gag.
Thanks.
Stan, I'm
a
a
lot.
big fan of yours, and Islander fan these days, but I remember my Ranger days. I used to go with my GO card for 75 cents, go to the Madison Square Garden, sit upstairs, then move down to sit right on the rail on the concrete steps. We were never bothered. But the greatest routine was I loved Steve Allen. And every Sunday I'd go to the game, and then be a bus outside the old Garden taking you to What's My Line with Steve Allen. That's how they got people to, on a Sunday night, to come to the show. They'd have a bus at MSG. And I also remember the locker rooms. We used to wait for Rod Gilbert, and we used to walk through Times Square, just like he was a regular guy. He was terrific. But my question to you was, again, being an Islander fan, how did you feel about the way Tavares left? Were you close with him? Have any feelings on it, the way he left the Islanders?
Well, first of all, I had to be close with him. I was the first one to interview him after he was drafted. I was up in Montreal, and very interesting story, because I love to tell players jokes at the right time. And he was drafted, and they brought him into the studio, and I had heard a good joke, and I told it to him. And it was like talking to the Sphinx. So I said, "I got problems with this guy." So now he comes to the team, and he's the captain. And because he's the captain, he's the first guy I got to interview after every game, because that was one of my jobs. And he was a good guy. He was a good guy. And in fact, one of the nicest things was, in terms of Tavares and me, was shortly after my wife Shirley died, he came over to me and offered personal condolence. I liked the guy for that. I liked him. I didn't think he was a superstar, but he was a very good player. And I was convinced, in my mind, in fact, I had lunch with the owner, one of the 2 owners, John Ledecky, and he asked me, Do you think he's going to stay? And I said, no, I don't. I just had bad vibes. But I was angry. I was furious when he left. There was a conference call, press conference, and I laid it to him. I gave him a very tough question, and he gave me a half-assed answer. And the fact that I was the only one who really grilled him got a lot of attention. To this day, I have my son Simon hates him still, roots against Toronto. My granddaughter Abigail hates him, and I have to tell you, to this day, in my heart of hearts, I root against him because of what he did. He gave it was unfair. He had an opportunity to say he's going to go to Toronto and give the Islanders an opportunity to pick somebody in a trade, and he gave the Islanders a jobbing. So enough said. He's an asterisk. He's an asterisk next to the question, next to the line. You should be nice to everybody. Well, there are exceptions.
Also, did you ever have any dealings with James Dolan at all?
Well, James is the son of Chuck Dolan. Chuck Dolan's the one who gave me my first NHL gig doing the Islander games starting in March 1975. I'm indebted to life to Chuck Dolan for starting Sports Channel, for taking over the Garden. And I knew Jimmy since he was a little pisher at his father's July 4th beachfront parties. But I never had any real dealings with him other than to say hello. But I like the guy. I like the guy because he's a Dolan, and he's the son of the guy who put me in business.
Any good Barry Beck stories?
Barry Beck, yeah, I got one for you. One of my interns was a kid named Craig Wolf. He was going to, I think he was going to Syracuse or one of the upstate colleges. And he mailed me some of his stories. And I could tell that this guy had the goods. So he became an intern of mine, and he wound up being the Ranger reporter for the New York Times when Barry Beck was the captain and Herb Brooks was the coach. And during a practice at which only Craig was there, he witnessed Herb Brooks calling Barry Beck a coward. Imagine that, calling your big, tough defenseman a coward. And Craig Wolf wrote the story, caused a sensation. And so there's your Barry Beck story.
Did you ever see Ranger defenseman Tom Laidlaw break a stick over his head?
No, but Tom Laidlaw became a very successful agent and is a good friend of mine. I never saw that.
Hey, Stan, in your career in the league, you've seen a lot of great players, going back probably to like guys like Gordie Howe and Bobby Hull, then the guys, the superstars on the Islanders and then on the Oilers, the great one. In your opinion, although they might have all played different styles of hockey, who do you think was the greatest hockey player ever?
Well, no doubt, Gordie Howe, greatest ever. He could stuff Wayne Gretzky into his pocket and carry him. Gordie Howe could do everything. He was the best fighter in the league. He was the best passer in the league. He was the best scorer in the league, and he was the best leader. He was everything, and he was also very dirty. And in those days, you could get away with dirty hockey. The rules were a little more relaxed than they are now, much more relaxed than they are now. So, but Gordie Howe was basically a forward, although he did play a little bit of defense. The greatest defenseman, now, again, this is not fair in one sense. How do you compare a 1939 Cadillac with a present-day Cadillac? They're two different, it's totally different. The game was totally different when, say, a defenseman like Ching Johnson was playing for the Rangers. They didn't wear helmets, the skates were different, the ice was different, everything was different. But if I were to pick a best defenseman, I'd pick Denny Potvin, because Denny Potvin could score. He was a very, very tough hitter, and he was a great leader. He was a captain, and he captained the Islanders to 4 Stanley Cups. He captained the Islanders to 19 straight consecutive playoff series victories. Now, as far as goaltending, I would take Glenn Hall, because Glenn Hall played, listen to this, Glenn Hall played 502 consecutive games in goal without a mask. Today, you ask any goalie, would he ever get into the net without a mask? He says, what are you, crazy? So those are my favorites. I'll tell you another one of my favorites. Her name is Agnes, and she hasn't asked me a question.
Thank you, Stan, but I'm not going to interfere with all these wonderful gentlemen here. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Stan. It's a
You're
pleasure
welcome.
to see you always. And I just have one thing to say to you, a big kiss from me.
You made my night, kid. Well, your day, it's your day. Any other questions?
She said you don't need a publicist because you're doing a pretty good job.
Not bad at all.
Any
Whose
more
hockey
questions?
stick is that behind you, Stan?
Oh, I'm in my granddaughter is 18, and she's playing hockey right now. In Israel, there are not many rinks, but in a town called Metula, which is a 45-minute drive from here, there's an Olympic-sized rink. And this is where my 3 grandchildren from here learn to play. And that's one of her sticks. She's a very keen Islander fan, and her boyfriend is a goalie, so they're keeping hockey in the family. That explained that explains the hockey stick. Any more? I'm going to have one more last story, but I'll take questions up until.
Hey, Stan, quick question. Have you ever heard of a hockey player with Devils named Uli Emer?
Yes, I do. I did games when he was playing defense. He was a German, big guy, pretty good, not great, but that was when the team was not so hot. Now they're one of the hottest teams in the league, but I do remember him well. But he was not in the all-star category. Any more?
What's your favorite hockey memory?
Oh boy, I'll preface that with a story. When Bobby Orr was in his prime, one of the greatest defensemen of all time, a guy from Life magazine went up to Parry Sound, Ontario, and interviewed Bobby Orr's mother. And one of his questions to her, Mrs. Orr, he said, what do you think of your son? And she said, which one? And there have been so many different thrills. Give me the question one more time. And while you're giving it to me, I'll give you an answer. Give me that question again.
What's your very favorite hockey memory?
Okay, it was the fourth playoff series of the Islanders. That would have been 83. They were playing the Edmonton Oilers with Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier, and they were heavy favorites to beat the Islanders. The Islanders already won 3 in a row. They were basically beat up, tie it out. And the Islanders beat them the first 2 games in Edmonton. Then there was the 3rd game. The Islanders beat them at the Islanders. And between the 3rd and the 4th game, there was a league luncheon where players and the coaches from all teams were there. And the coach of the Oilers, Glenn Sather, got up, very brash, almost brazen. He predicted that his team is going to come back and win. So we had a pretty good hate on for the Oilers. So my greatest thrill was when the Islanders pumped that last goal in game 4 to win their 4th straight cup. We got even with those Schnorrers in Edmonton, and we did what no other American team had done, and still hasn't done. Still hasn't done. No American team has won 4 straight cups. And that's not Kotzen cups, which is what my grandmother used to call me.
Stan, what's your best hockey fight memory?
Hockey fight?
What was your best hockey fight?
No question. It was Hal Fontanato at the Garden. I was there, practically sitting above them in the press box. Hal was behind the net, high sticking with Eddie Shack of the Rangers, and Louis Fontanato, who's considered then the heavyweight champion of the league, comes skating in because he had a grudge against Hal. He skated in and practically pushed Shack out of the way and started punching Hal. And after Hal took the second punch, he just punched the behoozes out of Fontanato so badly that Louis had to be taken to the hospital and kept in the hospital overnight. And from that point on, Fontanato was never the same. It's considered the best one-on-one in terms of the damage done. Another interesting one was Clark Gillies beating the crap out of Eddie Hospodar of the Rangers. Now, Gillies was not a fighter. He didn't like to fight. But if you kept bugging him, watch out. And this Hospodar of the Rangers was a tough guy, and he kept bugging Gillies, and Gillies kept saying, stop, stop, stop. And finally, in one of the playoff games, Gillies was sort of involved with some scrum, and somebody hit him from behind, and he turned around, and it was Hospodar, and he destroyed Hospodar. He destroyed Hospodar. They took Hospodar to Polyclinic Hospital. Next day, Frank Brown, who was an intern of mine, now covering the Rangers for the Daily News, he went to visit Hospodar in the hospital. Afterwards, he called up his desk, his sports editor, and sports editor says, "What are you doing, Frank?" He says, "I'm at Polyclinic Hospital." He said, "Well, what are you doing there?" He says, "Well, I just interviewed a guy who once looked like Eddie Hospodar." That's what a job Gillies did on him.
What's your favorite hockey nickname? Hospodar's was Boxcars, Leaping Louie, Slat Sather. What's your favorite nickname?
I have 2 favorites. One of my favorites players' full name was Maxwell Herbert Lloyd Max Bentley, who wound up his career, by the way, with the Rangers. He came from Delisle, Saskatchewan, and he skated like a scared jackrabbit. He's very hard to catch him. And his nickname was the Dipsy Doodle Dandy from Delisle. Now, the best nickname of all was a terrible goalie that the Rangers had during World War II. His name was Steve Buzinski. Steve Buzinski's nickname was Steve Buzinski, the puck goes in ski.
Wow, never heard of either of them. Thank you.
That's why I'm here.
Kurtenbach was a big toughie for the Rangers.
What's that?
Kurt back.
Any more?
Yes.
Oh.
Can you hear me, Stan?
Yeah, go.
Okay, I grew up in Coney Island. My father was an attorney for 50 years on Mermaid Avenue. My grandfather built the Mermaid Theater.
Wow.
And when I was 16, my parents moved to Seagate, and coincidentally, I lived in Staten Island for 30 years. Everything you spoke about. Now, did you belong to a shul in Coney Island?
What's that?
Did you belong to a synagogue?
Not in Coney, not in
Where
Coney.
did you live? I'm sorry, I missed the beginning. Where did you live? Because I thought you lived in Coney. Where did you live?
I lived in Williamsburg, and our shul congregation, Beth Jehuda, was on Bedford between Willoughby and Myrtle. And I was bar mitzvahed from a conservative shul on Park Place near Kingston called Temple Shara Zedek, the gates of righteousness. And my opening line in the speech, my dear parents, grandparents, relatives, and friends, this is the most important day of my life.
No, the reason I missed the beginning and you start talking about Coney Island, so I thought you were from Coney Island. I don't know why.
I know a mermaid theater story.
Yeah, right. My father played the silent organ there for when they had an organ.
Wow. Wow. What school did you go to? What high school? Lincoln?
I went to yeshiva. So
Okay. Okay. Well,
I didn't go to Lincoln. I went to yeshiva.
Do you know the gag about the difference between Orthodox, conservative,
I'm on.
and Reformed?
No, what?
So this Orthodox guy buys a Bentley. You know what a Bentley is? A car? Very expensive Bentley. Goes to his Orthodox rabbi, says, Rabbi, can you give a barucha for my Bentley? He says, what are you, crazy? We don't do baruchas for car. He says, I'm very, very anxious to get a barucha for my Bentley. Can you recommend maybe a conservative rabbi? So he goes to Temple on West End Avenue and 100th Street. And he goes,
Well, I'm on.
Look at me.
I can't. What? Right.
Conservative rabbi, can you give a barucha for my Bentley? He says, give me a minute to think it over. I'll come back and tell you. He comes back. He says, no, it's not right. It's not right for giving a barucha for a car.
Thank you.
Can you mute yourself there, Mr. Harris?
Okay. Harris.
Yeah.
Am I over? Am I done?
No, you're not done. Please finish.
So the conservative rabbi says he can't do a barucha
Okay, I'll
for
get
his
the-
Bentley.
I'll get the phone in a few minutes. I was talking on Zoom.
Okay, keep going, please.
He says, can you recommend maybe a Reform rabbi to give me a baruch? He says, go to the 5 towns and see, go to Temple Chervin B'nai Shnaras and see Rabbi Glickman. So he goes to Rabbi Glickman, the Reform rabbi, and he says, Rabbi, can you do a baruch for a Bentley, my Bentley? And the rabbi looks at him, he says, a Bentley, I know what it is. What's a baruch?
That's a great one.
Okay.
Stan, I got a question for you. You know, you mentioned Derek Sanderson. I remember seeing he made a movie years ago about him. Now, between Derek Sanderson, Ron Duguay, and let's say Greshna, who is the biggest playboy partier that you knew from the hockey days?
Who was the third one?
Greshna, Ron Greshna.
Greshna, I would say long term it would be Doogie. Doogie was I'm talking from what I've heard. I didn't hang out with guys like that, and but Doogie was nonstop. In fact, but they tell me now that he's dating the former governor of Alaska. But by the way, Doogie, wonderful guy. Rex Greshner, wonderful guy. Rod, I ghosted Rod's book, Go My Life on Ice. Wonderful, wonderful guys. Now, when I celebrated my 90th birthday, the Rangers invited me to a game, and they gave me, I'd show it to you if I had it off the wall. Brad Park, I ghosted his book, Play the Man, and Ronnie Greshner presented me with a plaque with a program for my very first game in 1942, my first Ranger game. And beautiful stuff, beautiful, beautiful stuff. So I don't have anything, even talking about Tavares. Look, he did what he felt he wanted to do, blah, blah, blah. So, but, hockey guys have been great guys. Excuse me. My buddy Irving Rudd was the press agent for the Brooklyn Dodgers when they were the Boys of Summer from 1950 until they left. And I ghosted Irving's book thanks to my friend Agnes. Agnes was the one who got me to do Irving Rudd's book. And Irving used to tell me about the Brooklyn Dodgers. And one day I said to Irving, what are these guys really like? And he quoted from Charles Dickens, and he said about the Brooklyn Dodgers, there is not a rotter in the lot, not a rotter in the lot. And that's basically what it is with hockey guys. There's always one bad apple and one schlemiel around, but good guys, and particular guys that you meant, Doogie, good pal. Greshner, he was there to give me the plaque. Brad Park, same thing. So good fellas, good movie, good fellas.
Roger Bear brought him the beer when he came and skated with us in pickup hockey after he retired. That's how nice a guy he was. We wanted to buy him the beer. He brought beer for us.
Well, I'll tell you about Steve Allen. When Steve Allen had his Tonight Show before Christmas, he did a show from Rockefeller Center rink, and he pretended to be the goalie, and Rod was the shooter. And Rod came down, and as Rod is about to shoot, Steve Allen turned the net around backwards. And Rod says, what are you doing that for? And Steve's punchline was, well, turnabout is fair play. That was his sight gag with the gag. Wonderful guys, wonderful.
Did you think the gag line was the best line of all time?
No. The Rangers' first line of the Cook brothers and Boucher was certainly one of the greatest. There were a lot the punchline with the Rocket Rashad and Toe Blake and Elmer Locke. Just a lot, great lines from different era. But the gag line was a very good line, but they never could win a cup. The Boucher-Cook line won cups for the Rangers in 28 and 33. Winning the cup makes a big difference, and they never did. They got knocked off by the Flyers.
The evil empire.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Let me just reiterate, if you guys are interested in my stories, you might like my book, Tales of Brooklyn, and you can get it via Amazon. And one of these minutes, I want to tell you what's behind this story. Okay? Any more questions? Anybody hear me?
We can hear you. We want to hear your story.
Okay, so you ready for this one?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm now working for the New York Journal American newspaper. The Journal American was Hearst's flagship evening paper when during the Hearst Empire. We had the largest circulation. And one of my beats was writing feature stories. So the Dodgers had won the World Series in 1955, and now it's the spring of 1956. And my sports editor, Max Case, K-A-S-E, wonderful sports editor, says, I want you to go to Ebbets Field. I want you to do a story on how these guys are getting the ballpark ready for the new season. So I grab hold of my photographer. His name was Dick Hockman. And we drive over to Ebbets Field. And we go out onto the pitcher's mound, and I'm interviewing the head groundskeeper, and I had a bunch of Western Union papers, and I'm writing down all my answers, and I finished the interview, and I said, okay, Dick, I think we can go now. He says, no, I want to get some better pictures. I said, okay, so where do you want to go? He says, let's go up on the roof. Now, Dick Hoffman didn't know that Fischler had a fear of heights, but I'm not going to tell him because I'm now doing a job for my paper and I have to listen to what I'm told to do. So he says, let's go up on the roof. So now I'm really scared, but we go up to the roof. Now, the roof on Ebbets Field, like in a lot of ballparks, it's not flat so that the rain can come off the roof. It's at an angle. So now we get up to the roof, we walk out, and I see, this is a cockamamie roof with an angle, and I don't like that. Even worse than that is what I heard Dick Hockman. He says, Dick and I were at the home plate part of the roof. He says, let's go take a walk around and see. So now I'm walking in the middle, right? Like I don't want to slide off and fly over down into the grandstands. And I'm walking along, I'm very, very nervous, as you can imagine. And he says, let's go all the way to the lights at center field. Now, this is the farthest of the night, the lights for the night games. So by the time we got to the center field, I'm 10 times a nervous wreck. I said, what do you want to do now, Dick? He says, I want to get a picture of you like you're examining the lights for the first night game. And what do you mean? I said, what do you mean? He says, what I want you to do is climb up this little ladder here and go up to the top. And then you're going to take out your papers and you're going to pretend that you're taking notes. Well, I mean, what's beyond being scared to the 100th power? But I got to do it, right? So this picture was taken. This is a very scared Fischler pretending to be writing down notes on the top rung. Actually, I'm above the lights at Ebbets Field. Now, what the picture doesn't show you is what happened then. Hockman takes the pictures. He says, okay, you can come on down now. So I put my notes in my left jacket pocket. And as I'm very frighteningly coming down the ladder, my jacket gets caught in the ladder, and the notes start flying out of my pocket. Now, this natural reaction when something like that happens is to try to grab them. But if I tried to grab them, I would be flying over the ball field like Icarus, and I wouldn't be around to tell this tale to you. So I quickly subdued my reflex and came down, and we eventually went down to center field, and I retrieved the notes, and I went back to 220 South Street, and this is the story that inspired my story, the Next Day Journal American, and this is the book, Tales of Brooklyn. So that was, I would say, that was one of the scariest moments of my entire life, and I had a picture to prove it.
Oh, poop, he just froze. Oops, Stan, you're frozen.
Don't move.
Don't move. Let's see. if we get it there.
Let's see, it's not my internet. My internet is just fine.
You wonder Arab attack?
Yeah, everybody's moving. Yeah, not,
We lost them.
yeah, it's his internet. So,
Is there a 2-hour limit or something?
Could be 2-hour Zoom limit.
no, I
Yeah,
paid
we
for,
we got platinum.
yeah.
We've had Yom Kippur services
services,
that went,
yeah.
that went like 10 hours.
Oh, okay, yeah, you got platinum, you should be good.
So looks like his thing
logged-
will drop,
he
maybe he'll be
dropped.
back, but I don't know that he knows how his tech support had to go, so.
That might be,
Is it Rob Greenfield?
yeah, Rob, Dr. Rob.
Oh, well. Thank you to the men's club. I feel like I met the maven. You guys are wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
We should write Stan in
Tell
there.
your friends and family about us.
Yeah, spread the word.
I'm gonna buy his book.
Please.
That just makes a quarter on that.
And I will. I'll spread the word about to all my rink rat buddies.
I think this is gonna conclude
Show.
the show. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
We got cookies and coffee.
Got some cookies and coffee back there. You can have them virtually over there.
Okay, thank you.
Have a nice afternoon, everybody.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Mark Hilton especially. Thank you, Mark.
We take those
Yeah.
compliments.
Yeah, Stan was great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, he was. All right. Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah, everybody.
Same to you.
Exactly.
Bye-bye.
Well.